sorry about that.
All good, all good.
All right, should we start even though it's not 6 yet? Yeah? Okay, so
Yeah.
hi
We got
everyone.
2 minutes. um, I'm happy to start. Maybe we do some introductions and stuff. Maybe we start with you.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Mara. I'm Communications Officer at SIF, and I'm here with Jeremy, who is our Communications and Outreach Coordinator. And this is the first of our Instagram fundraiser live sessions. So basically, we're just starting this Instagram fundraiser thanks to our sponsors, who will be donating 300 rupees, $23, towards the eco school trip that was missed last year. So thanks to that, we will be able to help fund the school trip. So feel free to ask questions in the comments. So yeah, just send forward all your questions and we'll answer them as we go. And yeah, I just want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors. So we have MCB Seychelles, Cable and Wireless, H-Savvy Insurance, Sakos Insurance, and Space 95, who are sponsoring the Instagram Live. So thank you to our sponsors. And yeah, it's 6 now, so I'll have Jeremy introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Mara. And yeah, I mean, nothing much more to add. My name is Jeremy. I've worked about 3.5 years continuously with the Seychelles Islands Foundation, with both sites. But I actually started working with SIF back in 2013 for the first time on Aldabra. So I was really lucky to get the chance to be on Aldabra for 7 months in 2013 before going off to uni. So it really gave me a life opportunity and changed my life trajectory. And I've had the chance to visit Aldabra 2 other times for about 5 weeks each time, with a project, the Aldabra Kina project. So I'm a big fan of Aldabra, keen to see people go. It's a hard place to go, but there's ways to get there. Keen to share as much as my experiences. And yeah, I mean, we can raise money for the missed eco school trip of 2020. If we can do that, if we can go towards that today, and the next couple of times we do this over this month, it'd be an amazing thing. So yeah, thanks for everybody's tuning in, and thank you to our sponsors.
So I don't see anyone sent in any questions yet. Guys, please do send in your questions, because without your questions, we can't raise any money. Any question you have on Aldabra or SIF would be much appreciated, and we'll do our best to answer. But I do have one question we got through DM, so I can read that out to you. So what do you consider to be the single most important factor to ensure the long-term well-being of the atoll?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Aldabra is clearly Seychelles. It's clearly a gift to humanity in that sense. It's clearly Seychelles' gift to humanity. However, it's really far from Seychelles. It's about 4 days by boat, 3.5 hours before you get to the nearest airstrip on Assumption. And so a big part of what we do is try and keep Aldabra in people's mind, keep its importance, its beauty, its outstanding universal value. So Aldabra needs to be supported and supported from far away. The second we forget about it, the second we lose consciousness of it, it's going to be hard to do anything after that, whether it's tackle invasive species there, whether it's tackle plastic pollution or climate change, whether it's research. This all depends on others, on Mahe, in other parts of the world, remembering and thinking about Aldabra and seeing its links to their lives, to their livelihoods, and to their futures. So that's a very tricky question, but I think it really is about keeping that connection to Aldabra alive so that others can help it out.
That's great. So I have our first question. Thank you so much, BB96. Currently, what is the biggest threat to both World Heritage sites? So that is Valley de Mai and Aldabra that we're currently managing.
That's an excellent question. Climate change, in a nutshell, climate change is overwhelmingly an existential threat, not just to our UNESCO World Heritage Sites, but to the hundreds around the world. This is no matter what we see locally in terms of good efforts. I mean, we've seen mangroves on Aldabra increase by over 50 football fields in the last 20 years. We've seen the Validemay take on invasive species control. We've seen lots of successful things on the ground, good management, great science, effective, coordination of very difficult sites. But climate change, things that are something that's, I would say, beyond the control of a country like Seychelles, an organization like SIF, is threatening these places. Unpredictable weather, rising sea levels, sea temperatures, ocean acidification, increased fire risk. All these things have been highlighted by the IUCN as some of the biggest threats, if not the biggest threats, to our UNESCO sites, as well as others.
That's great.
And if I can add, it also amplifies other existing threats that already face these sites.
That's true. Thank you, Vivi, for another question. So she heard Jeremy mention tackling invasive species earlier. How do you manage the impact of invasive species? What practices do you have in place? Can we count that as 2 questions?
Yeah, sure. Both excellent questions then. So if I can...
Yeah.
If you could repeat that again, sorry?
How do you manage the impact of invasive species?
Cool. So for both sites, this is a key. We've got an amazing team. So actually, our project coordinator, Christina Quantz, she's an amazing person when it comes to biosecurity. And I know Veronique Banan, Emeline Lafortune, many people involved with SIF, both sides. I can name a lot more. But biosecurity is a key thing. We need to prevent, especially somewhere like Aldabra, receiving invasive alien species. Invasive alien species, like a very common one that we'll see in Seychelles, is like the Indian myna bird, or what we call martin in Creole. So these invasive species, they can compete with endemics, native flora and fauna. So you have creepers, all these things. So if these things go to a place like Aldabra, they can compete and basically decrease the population, decrease the survivability of these species. So we have to prevent these things going there. And that's, as we research over there, as we carry projects, as there's tourism activities on Aldabra, there's always a risk of carrying these things from Mahe, from the rest of the world, to a place like Aldabra. Also, for both UNESCO sites, and Validemay is a difficult one because it's on a populated island, and it's also Seychelles is the most visited tourist destination. For Validemay, just to put it out there, so as well as Aldabra, we're tackling invasive species. So the Yellow Crazy Ant project, which has seen 98% reduction, that's been us going out and basically applying specific, I would say, specific efforts with research and very, very low concentrations of a poison for ants to basically reduce their population in a very targeted way. On Aldabra, we've still got invasive species like rats and cats, and there's hopefully a plan in the making to tackle them. But we've tackled things like goats, sisals, 2 species of birds, and that's been with a lot of intervention, a lot of money. So the research and science happens first, and then direct intervention takes place. And then it's about monitoring the effects of what happens after these invasive species are taken out, are eradicated. And a big one actually for Seychelles, which is really interesting, is the ringneck parakeet. So that was something where SIF was able to, with the Ministry of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment, with the Seychelles People's Defense Forces, was able to, for the first in the world, eradicate the ringneck parakeet, which basically threatened the black parrot that we have on Parrot with a particular virus.
That's great. I don't know if you answered what practices do we have in place to reduce that impact, basically?
Yeah, so the first thing is effective biosecurity, making sure that all the things we send to places like Aldabra are cleaned, are packaged well, so no insects, no seeds, as much as possible, no living things get to Aldabra. That's making sure that nothing gets and establishes there. And whatever's there already, making sure that we can basically find the effective tools. If that's a plant, it's about thinking about mechanical removal of that plant, actually physically going out, cutting out, or it might be the use of pesticide in a very specific way. If it's, as we hope with the rats and cats, it's basically, and any animal, it's about humane euthanasia and proper follow-up with these types of animals so that they are eradicated from places like that. If it's in the Valley de Mai, this is control more than eradication. It's about minimizing these populations or completely removing them from an area. So I hope that answers. But a lot of science, a lot of then intervention happens.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, if it isn't clear, do send more questions if you think, if you have more questions from the answers. So next question from Yupeksha. What were the outcomes of the Aldabra cleanup project? And also, Jeremy, if you just give a quick overview on the project in case people don't know.
Sure. So the Aldabra cleanup project was a collaboration between Seychelles Islands Foundation and the University of Oxford with the Queen's College. It saw many sponsors, many supporters in Seychelles and outside of Seychelles come together to fund this project, which was 18 months and managed to raise basically $250,000. And it brought together 12 volunteers. I was lucky to be part of the team of volunteers that were fundraising, awareness raising, basically going out there before the expedition, which took place in early 2019, so February, March. And it was a case of going out there to, one, remove as much plastic pollution as possible, or marine pollution, I should say, as possible, to do a lot of research and find out where it's coming from, the accumulation rates, how it's impacting the biodiversity there, and really then try and reuse this stuff once it's back on Mahi. So bring it back to Mahi, find out what can be done to reuse, recycle, put it part of the circular economy. So I would say the major outcomes was raising that money, raising awareness. We were able to reach a great amount of people in Seychelles and abroad through great partnerships with Sky News, with SBC. We were able to remove over 25 metric tons of plastic pollution, of which most of it was fishing gear by weight. And then we did publish the research. So April Bird was instrumental in being our lead researcher. So we were able to research and find out that 83% of what we estimate is about 500 tons of the plastic pollution in Aldabra is from fishing gear. And particularly since Seychelles depends on industrial tuna fisheries, the region depends on industrial tuna fisheries, we could link through analysis of like fish aggregating devices, which have satellite numbers and everything. We could basically find out that our industrial fisheries, as well as the regional fisheries, are responsible for a lot of that waste. Beyond that, I think it was a case of really creating environmental ambassadors. The volunteers who went there really had a treat of a lifetime. So it was a case of giving them the tools, giving them the experience to really understand what Aldabra is, and then go out to their communities, go out to the country, go out of Seychelles to communicate about Aldabra.
Thank you for that. So another question from Mary May. Hi, Jeremy. What is the latest figures on the population of giant tortoises on Aldabra? That's a lot.
Excellent question. We're getting there. I really like that question. That's very good. So our official figures, what we try and say is over 100,000. We know it's over 100,000. The closest figures is somewhere just over 120,000. We are getting more confident. I'm hoping by next year we'll be able to give a very close estimates. It's actually interesting as well. Like, it's good to bring this out. I think with our estimates, it's we do try and go for the middle figures. So this middle figure of 120,000 is what we have right now, but it's always a range. But we're trying to figure out that range. So I hope that answers the question as best as it can right now.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. So another question from Mademoiselle Julie. Any recent massive conservation successes at any of the sites?
Wow. I right now, I mean, I've only been 3 years. The most recent and I think impactful one has to go right now to the Valley de Mai. The efforts of the yellow crazy ants. I think we've gone through 5 bait-ins, and these I've taken only part in 1 or 2, I think. Anyway, not as much as others. And so they've seen a 98% reduction in yellow crazy ants. And yellow crazy ants, in Creole, we know them as foamy Maldives. but they're really in the top most invasive and destructive invasive species in the world. So for SIF, for Seychelles to be able to control these ants, which are, you know, really a threat to invertebrates in the Vallée des Mets, and also other species which are still figuring out the impact, is amazing. I already know the team there are witnessing positive signs, good indications in some of the endemics. So they've been able to spot a lot more like white slugs and other species that we know have been impacted by these yellow crazy ants. So that's for sure a big one. And I know in terms of biosecurity on Aldabra, there's been huge efforts in terms of basically creating a biosecurity room, which is sounds, but think of it as a quarantine for your food. If anything was on Aldabra that had a pest that was basically not found out on Mahe or on the boat or the plane on its way to Aldabra, that's its last place. So they've managed to create the building, and the biosecurity has increased, and procedures-wise. It's good to note there's also some really good past achievements that are crazy. So goats eradicated on Aldabra, that happened in 2012. And that was after decades of people going after these goats. Aldabra was also the first place in Seychelles to have an off-the-grid solar power system. That was also 2012. There was also, we've mentioned the eradication of the ringneck parakeet, and it was also the eradication of these two birds on Assumption Aldabra. So this, at the time, I think it was 2015 or so, was the world's largest eradication of birds. So it's a lot. The SIF has quite a lot to show for it. And I know one thing which is really cool, which links to this actual activity, is 50 years of the Aldabra Research Station. Keeping that going is a huge achievement for Seychelles and all those who are involved, you know, beyond SIF and within SIF. And Eco Schools at the end of the day celebrated its 20 years last year. So I know we've been able to monitor and evaluate the impact of that program.
That's great. And also, I mean, it's a lot of achievements to fit into a short answer, but do visit the website, which is www.sif.sc, if you do want to learn more about conservation efforts that SIF has achieved over the years. Another question from Upeksha. Interesting stats on fishing gear. How much of the plastic collected in the project was recycled, and what is done with the plastic that has built up since then? Yeah.
Yeah, excellent questions. I'll definitely count that as two.
Yeah.
So in terms of what happened to what we collected, we had high aims. We had hoped for something between 40 and 60% recycle, which out of 25 tons, you know, that's getting on for, you know, 12 to 15 tons in some ways, well, between 10 and 15. We managed to just recycle about 4 tons, and that was really in reuse. So there was one where we had big recycling days, or big, you know, days where we called out to community. So whether it was NGOs, artists, schools, a small business actually also was able to take part in this, and they were able to take flip-flops for things like art projects. They were able to take batteries from fads to make outdoor lighting. Buoys were taken from us to be used by the Seychelles National Parks now. You know, in demarcation of the areas and using their research. I know MCSS was also able to take some of these buoys in other parts. And that was an achievement in itself. So that was about 15% of what we had collected. But with COVID-19 for sure, and just a lack of being able to keep this space that we had. I mean, we had been given this space by the Landscape and Waste Management Agency for 6 months, but there's a time limit in terms of where you can keep this separate from the waste of the landfill. So we basically were in talks with a university in Germany to have about 10 tons sent up, which is a lot more complicated than it sounds, because you can't just send fire hazards and waste. You have to really understand what you're sending up and making sure it's insurable and safe. We had hoped to send this up to this university for testing, and they were hoping to basically use up 10 tons, but COVID-19 definitely stopped us there. Did I answer the second question in answering these ones or no? I don't know.
Oh, so what is done with the plastic that has built up since then? So I'm guessing now that we're no longer doing the project and it's just constantly building up. I don't remember if you know the statistics on how much is estimated on Aldabra right now.
Yeah, so we're still figuring it out. So April but is the expert on this one. At last count, I mean, we have to remember there's somewhere between 250 and 800 tons on Aldabra. I think a very conservative estimate, the last one I heard, was 6 tons a year is ending up on Aldabra. Now, the reason for the Aldabra cleanup project was because it overwhelmed the capacity of the staff on Aldabra. I mean, even 12 volunteers, we were actually heavily supported by the Seychelles Coast Guard and actually the whole Seychelles People's Defense Forces and those on Aldabra already. And so for a team of only about, ever between 12 and 16 people, to try and manage 6 tons a year, and across a very large area, large length of coastline. I mean, Aldabra is somewhere between 37 kilometers long by 10 kilometers at its widest. So this is very hard for a small team to take on, but they are basically taking on small cleanups at our field camps and also carrying on research. So the research is key, so we understand how much is ending up there, and this will inform future more large-scale in activities. Just to point out, if you think of it as costing 10,000 or between $10,000 and $15,000 per ton to remove of waste off Aldabra, and this is quite a conservative estimate, it will cost somewhere between $4 and $5 million dollars to completely remove the waste that's on Aldabra, and that's just to remove it. Never mind think about the damage it's causing there already.
That's crazy. Another question from Tigger Ranger Jones. Since the pandemic has impacted the eco school trip, which has been ongoing uninterrupted for some years now, how has SIF tried to bridge that gap and adapting to the new normal?
Excellent question. I mean, this is one opportunity we wanted to, this was a challenge that we're turning into opportunity with something like this. So the eco schools trip to Aldabra, it's been going for 20 years. COVID-19 it managed to disturb about 2020 activities. But piracy in the past had basically interrupted the eco schools as well. So the reason we couldn't take this on is number one, health and safety for those participating, and then just the funds required. I mean, we saw a 70% reduction in SIF's revenue in 2020. And that's something that really hurt our operations, but we're able to tap into savings and conduct a lot more efforts in terms of grant and fundraising to basically meet that shortfall. So this actual event, we're hoping to raise some of the money that would basically pay for the trip, for the missed trip, so that these kids can go in 2022. And we've got some other ideas up our sleeves, but we have to see how this goes. But SIF makes a commitment to education outreach. I mean, this is a cornerstone of what we do. We want our science, our projects, our results to be accessible and to be engaging. So this is one example of that. And I know with our Communications for Change project, we're basically also moving to a place where Aldabra and our Validame is already there, but where we are having good internet connection, so that not only Seychelles children, but also public in Seychelles, children and public around the world can interact with those on Aldabra, interact with those on Validame, so that education outreach can happen in a virtual setting. And so more can basically experience this. I mean, we've been really trying to push for connection between what is really far away but so important. And I think the Communications for Change project, which we'll see a satellite installed on Aldabra by the end of this year, hopefully, will really allow others to be connected to Aldabra despite COVID and despite other challenges that might come.
That's great. We did get the question that was sent to the DM again. So do you want to answer it again quickly? Or
I think that's okay for now. Yeah, I think if we just for time, but I can go back towards at the end as well.
Live will also be up on our news feed. So Elizabeth, you can rewatch the beginning if you missed it. Another question is, how is the Cocodema replanting campaign going?
Really well. In a quick one, I think we launched around this time last year. with the Ministry of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment. And so you'll have to forgive me here, but I know we've had over 100 applications. And the last check in terms of our progress, and this is all in our newsletter as well, but if I can remember my stats, I think we are several hundred coco de mer planted on Mahé. I think it's somewhere between 150 and 200 coco de mer planted across Mahé, with more to be planted on Mahé as well as Parrot. The team are really moving despite COVID, but while respecting, social distancing and health guidelines. They're really moving to meet those who've already put their requests in. I think everybody who has applied has been able to have at least one of their coco de mer plants, one of them coco de mer nuts planted. And just as a quick reminder, this is something where for 500 rupees for a processing fee, SIF goes to your site, goes to your property, evaluates it, see it has the right soil, right area, good security, and then you're able to plant one of the flagship species of Seychelles, which will take 25 years maybe to mature before it before it becomes sexually mature. But it's important to note you would need multiple coco de mer trees for it to actually reproduce in that way and provide nuts. But yeah, the uptake in people wanting these nuts and being planted in their gardens, in their property is really incredible. And I think the feedback that we're getting is very, very appreciated, very positive.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great scheme, and I think anyone should try and apply. Just had a clarification from April, who did mention that 60 tons a year of
60.
Yeah, pollution debris on Aldabra, and then she put work in
Thanks.
progress in bracket. Thank you, April, for clarifying.
Yeah.
So a question from
that was something I couldn't even believe. That's something I couldn't even believe. But 60, it shows you 60 is crazy.
60 tons, 60 tons. So a question from Karen: how is the seabird nesting project going?
Seabird nesting project.
Yeah.
So I know we have Annette Fayette who's doing a tropic bird. I'm not sure if it's called that one in particular, but we have Dr. Annette Fayette, who's doing monitoring of our tropic birds on Aldabra in terms of population. So that's one where basically she is going into the population and understanding what threats they face and what impacts having on the population, if it's growing or if it's decreasing. At the moment, I'm not privy to her research results, but I'm imagining that's the one. I think we also have several other projects going on with birds. I mean, such as the frigate bird census. But I might be mistaken on that one, or might not be understanding.
I'm not sure, Karen. If you'd like to clarify, that would be, and then we can actually answer the question as best as we can. So there's a great question from Mademoiselle Julie. If someone only had one day on the atoll, what would you recommend as a must-see spot on Aldabra? One.
Okay, there are 2 dunes on Aldabra, and if you were lucky enough to be there for one day, I'm saying 24 hours, I would hope it'd be sometime in around now, maybe July to October. I'd hope it would be a full moon. I'd hope there would be all these factors so that maybe you'd see a whale as this, but at 8 meters high, that's the highest point on Aldabra. You could see the sunrise and sunset from there. You could maybe see a whale breach. You would see the tortoises over Aldabra, like over these areas of grass, which really show like a savanna side of Aldabra and Seychelles that you don't see. I would say on top of these dunes, you'd have an unobscured view. I think the research station is amazing, but once you go to one of the field camps, so Dunes Immenses, Dunes Anjouis, where these 2 spots are, these 2 dunes are, this would be amazing. And as I say, though, I'm already contradicting myself in saying that maybe the better one than this is Middle Camp, which you have the frigate bird population there. So honestly, it's a very hard question. I would have to say the dunes maybe to just see the whole atoll from above. But there's nowhere more magical, I think, than Middle Camp and how you're around the frigate bird colonies, seeing the sharks and seeing so much. Very hard question, but thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that was a great question. I wouldn't know, but it's fine. So another question from Glennie Empire: is SIF doing enough to promote and encourage conservation more in schools?
Oh, great question. I think it's one where we see each year there is good stats to show we're reaching schools, and we're not just going for schools. By the way, we're going not just primary, secondary, or post secondary, but we're going all the way to those in their retired age. So for me, it's one of the things where in the last 3 years, I see outreach has already been a strong place and a cornerstone of SIF's work, whether it's Aldabra, Vallée and now Fonfenzina being part of SIF. So we've developed school books and school material. We do holiday camps each year, apart from now with COVID-19. The Eco School project, the Eco School trip to Aldabra is a big incentive for the Eco Schools program. You know, in terms of going out to schools for competitions, presentations, giving skills to teachers, giving resources to teachers. This is a constant project. I mean, this is actually why we have Amara joining us, and we will have Miss Maria at the Vallée de Mai, our education outreach project program officer. So the three of us, we're in communications full time, and we're adding Mara on because we realize we need to do more, and there'll never be enough. But I think we're definitely putting a big dent in the sense of getting towards the aim of making everything accessible. It's really hard to do that in a way that is always consistent, I guess, because there's so many different parts to take on. But we do always make our resources available, and we try to always catch up with things that we might have missed. So in my opinion, we're definitely trying hard. And I think from the feedback from schools, teachers, and school children, we're seeing kids understand and learn a lot about Aldabra, tell their parents about flamingos and dugongs before their parents know about it, things like that. So I think we're doing a fair attempt.
Yeah. So another question from blackparrot.co. Is SIF employing any new techniques in protecting the black parrot against the minor birds?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Monica, our Black Parrot officer, and I think this tells us that we need to do a Vallée de Mai Instagram Q&A actually. So, but I'm not going to be able to answer this as best as she can. So the Black Parrots have been monitored for the last 10 years. So actually the season's coming up soon for that. We know the minor birds are crowding them out, competing with them for their nesting areas, potentially for other things like food. And you know, miners are really competitive, really destructive in that way. As far as we know, it's about monitoring and research at this point to effectively intervene and to create a sustainable, meaningful impact. We really got to understand the situation. So the last couple of years, I know we've been able to do a census on this threat, so find out how many minor birds are encroaching on the black parrot's territory. Beyond that, the only other kind of options in taking on something like an invasive species is controlling or eradication. So I can tell you the eradication effort for the ringneck parakeet is much easier than something like a minor bird. Just to give you an example, and a big shout out to the team on North Island, they've been able to eradicate minor birds on North Island, and this is after many years, much investment. And that's a much smaller island, less connected maybe to where minor birds are found in Seychelles. So anything short of that, going out and eradicating controlling species, it's not going to really protect the black parrot. But with talking to the Ministry of Agriculture and Climate Change, Environment, talking to our other partners, so this, again, Seychelles People's Defense Forces, there may be efforts in the future to try and control the species. But at this stage, I can't confirm that. But it's something we're in conversation with partners.
Yeah, I can understand that would be hard. You see them everywhere, like all the time. So it's hard, especially on Parrot, which is right there. So question from Anael. Hi, Jeremy. What other exciting projects does SIF have planned for the year for children/teens?
Yeah, great question. So as part of the 50th anniversary, this is one of these events. So these Instagram lives, there'll be three more of these happening in September. So each Wednesday at 6 p.m., we're doing a traveling exhibition for the 50th anniversary where we'll showcase what has happened. And this is going to be big posters, easy, accessible language to see how much has changed over these last 50 years. I believe we're going to do a treasure hunt, a family treasure hunt, but stay tuned for more details on that. I can't give too much away at this point. We have, beyond the 50th anniversary, as part of the Communications for Change live link-ups with places like Valley de Mai, Aldabra. I mean, for Aldabra, it's really about climate change. So getting kids to interact with those on Aldabra. So right now, I'm talking from Belom, which is not as exciting as those who would be interacting with all these amazing things on Aldabra. So expect a lot more live interactions with the team on Aldabra as work permits. It's hard to balance these things. I think there's a lot of videos coming out around climate change. There'll be ways in which you can add your voice to what SIF is doing. So stay tuned on our social media for sure. I think we have a lot of things in the works, but it's a case of really knowing if it's going to happen this year or next year. So it's a bit of a tricky one to answer on that. I would say we always do competitions for schools, whether it's public speaking, we've done poetry and songs. So look out, we always do competitions with schools and other exciting activities. And just to note, SIF is often an organizer, but it also supports a lot of the really great initiatives carried out by other environmental organizations and the Department of Environment. So I know the Department of Environment is doing a really cool recycled Christmas tree competition. So that's something that schools, the public, others can get involved with. There'll be an eco district award coming out. So again, that's something to look out for. So off the top of my head, those are some of the key things, and I hope that highlights what's available.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And just to piggyback on what you said in regards to we're on Mahe, but this is just the first of the series that we're doing. So there will be 3 more episodes coming out every Wednesday until the 22nd. And there will be people from Aldabra who will be coming in as well, maybe. We'll see. And so you can even ask them, let me give you like a quick tour if you ask them like a nice question. If you ask like 3 questions, maybe I can ask them to give you a tour of that. But yeah, do tune in for those as well. So that way they can give a lot more in depth of what work they're doing there and how life is over there. So Karen was just clarifying, she was mainly wondering about the fligat birds and well explained on that. A question from Babzi Du. I was about to ask about the holiday camp. Where exactly do we go for this service, and does it have a fee for this? Oh, I'm guessing this is the Aldabra Eco School trip. So maybe you can give a bit of an overview on that.
So yeah, I think if it's the Aldabra Eco School trip, this is something that SIF just sponsors. So we have no say in the selection. The Eco Schools program. So this is an amazing. It's over 20 years old now. It's really, Seychelles is a leader. This is a great sign in showing that in terms of sustainability, environmental protection, there's a lot of education going on in Seychelles for our young people. And so the Eco School trip to Aldabra recognizes and awards those eco schools and students and teachers who've really gone out there to recycle, to do tree planting, to go beyond these things and write essays, create solutions, really showcase what's possible when you think green, when you think environmental consciousness. So that's the way that's organized. So I think it's primary and secondary students across all schools in Seychelles compete, and they're awarded points for all the environmental and sustainable activities that take place in a year. And then I think the 13 students and about 3 teachers are selected, the winners are selected to go to Aldabra for this trip. With the SIF holiday camp, in case that's also something to highlight, that usually happens twice a year. So again, our education outreach program officer, Ms. Maria Brioche, along with other team on Valley de Mai, they basically organize, I think it's just over a week. It could be 2 weeks, sorry. 2 weeks where they go not just to the Valley de Mai, but also in the past, and especially now again, Fort Ferdinand and some other sites across Parlet, and it's really organized between parents and schools on Parrot. I mean, in that sense, it's possible for people on Mahe to go, but then it's a case of having accommodation on Parrot, which SIF unfortunately can't provide. But all those who are on Parrot are able to enjoy the UNESCO site on their doorstep, you know? So kids are basically able to join these holiday camps absolutely for free, and they get to interact with our team at the Vallée de Mai, Fonfesina, as well as other organizations such as TRAS, you know, where they've gone and done tree planting. Yeah, and a really cool thing, I don't think necessarily related to do those things, but a really cool thing that we've come up at Vallée de Mai is a night safari. So that's something I could answer more questions about if there is at some point.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess obviously if you want to sign up or you're interested in the holiday school, you can contact your school and check on the possibility of that. So question.
You can always also send a message to our accounts and info@sif.sc, you know. These are ways of, if there's any clarifications, any information, that's our way of reaching us.
Yeah, that's true. So another question, what are some of the main research work being conducted day-to-day and season-wise on Aldabra? And then another question, season change impact the monitoring programs? So the first one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might be the longest, I think, along with climate. So we have climate. So in the past, that was done in a wet sense where it was manual, where our rangers would go out and take the temperature, see, you know, the direction of the wind, other climatic information data was collected. But one as old, if not, yeah, I think is the turtle monitoring, the track counts. So on the island of Picard, so weather research station, so Aldabra has 4 main islands. Our staff every morning without fail goes on Picard Beach, Settlement Beach as it's known, it's about 2 kilometers. They walk along that beach. So I've managed to do that a couple of times myself. It's an amazing way to start your day. It's about 6 a.m. I believe. So every day at 6 a.m. and you walk along this beach, counting the tracks you find. And you have to really know what you're doing. You can't count what was there before, a couple of days before. You have to see fresh counts. And there's all these really cool things like half moons, and then maybe you see where it's nested and you learn how that is actually a nest. So the team have been doing that for well over, I think about 43, 44 years now. So that's a big monitoring one that goes on. And we've seen an incredible increase in turtles. So Aldabra is actually one of the most important sites in the Western Indian Ocean when it comes to green nesting turtles, green turtles. And in March, I believe the team recorded about 1,500 tracks. So on average, about 50 turtles coming up, you know, for that month in March. So it's an incredible monitoring program there. Quickly, we've mentioned the frigate bird census, so that's something that happens not every day. It's more irregular. We also have a land bird. Again, that's seasonal when they're breeding. So we go and monitor all the endemics. So there's the Aldabra drongo, Aldabra foddy. There's I think 12 endemic birds on Aldabra that are land birds. We used to do weight accounts back in my time. I'm not sure we do that. We have opportunistic sightings of marine mammals, be it dugongs or whales and dolphins. We have the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program. That's seasonal, every Northwest season. So between October and January, maybe a little bit later sometimes, depending on the weather, the team goes out and does assessments of fish and coral. It really, there's a lot. I can't go for everything, but there's a lot for sure.
Yeah, and
I hope that covers that. Yeah.
How does the season change impact the monitoring programs? I'm guessing, like you mentioned, some of them can only be done during certain seasons. So how does that impact?
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, for instance, with the Aldabra Reef Monitoring Program, which is a really incredible story how that's set up, and I'm hoping we can by the end of this year tell that story through Communications for Change. But essentially, like tourism and like the eco schools, like when most of the activity happens, it's when it's calm. So, you know, from about October, so going into the Northwest season, Aldabra tends to be in a calmer period all the way up to about April, May. So that's when we actually do our supplies of Aldabra. That's when we do a lot of our monitoring, that it depends on good weather, good clear, calm weather. So that allows our team to go out. And then if it's something like a breeding, like for the birds, that's also basically knowing when they breed in that sense and following that. So weather as well as breeding patterns of certain species is key determinants of why and when these programs happen.
Yeah. So I got another 2 questions. I'll just give you the first one from Felicita. Can you tell us a bit about the marine work going on Aldabra? So ARM, basically, right?
Yeah. And I think, and how bleaching has affected the coral reefs, that's great questions. I mean, I think, again, I'm just going to shout out to those who might appear here. I don't know. So we have Dr. Anna Cuesta. So she's our marine researcher on Aldabra. I mean, April, I know, is in the comments somewhere. So she's also been our Aldabra science coordinator. So they can definitely answer these questions better than I can. But Aldabra has definitely seen an impact in the 1998, 1999 bleaching event, the 2015, 2016 event. So we saw much less so than in the islands, coral, hard and soft coral being affected by bleaching. So just to give you an idea, bleaching occurs when sea temperature increases for sustained periods of time, and a coral is a bit of a weird creature, if I can say it. So it's a marine invertebrate with a plant inside there. So it's a symbiotic relationship. So when that sea temperature is sustained, above what is normal, that algae, that symbiosis is broken. So that algae is expelled, and so the way in which that coral is able to get energy, is able to feed itself, that is prevented. And if it goes on for too long, the algae is not able to come back. So that coral dies and whitens. So that's why we call it bleaching event in that sense. So the marine work, because it started off in 2013 and has continued since then, has been able to see not only coral, but also the fish that are dependent on this coral, the large predators that are dependent on that fish, those coral fish, has been able to see what it's been like at a more, I would call it, normal year, or at least a baseline, in the sense of understanding what is there before bleaching and then after bleaching. And Anna's work has been really good in showing what it's like to have somewhere like Aldabra, which is protected, which doesn't have human or anthropogenic activities taking place as much. So whether it's fishing, whether it's dropping your anchor on coral, whether it's pollution, this is not happening on Aldabra, and this allows that to be more resilient. So we've seen Aldabra have a faster recovery rate than other places, and that's because of the science that's been done there. We're able to show what's there. And again, April's work with coral is a really interesting one in terms of which species are more resilient to climate change in terms of being able to take on things like increased temperature. And the arm has been something that this kind of research benefits from.
Yeah, and April did just comment. She did say 52% of hard coral loss in 2016, but rapid recovery at Aldabra because the marine ecosystem is well balanced, which is like really bad and really good at the same time.
Exactly.
Question from Albania: how is life on Aldabra?
I will say the last time I went to Aldabra was hectic. So I'm not gonna say how it is now. I will actually ask you to please save that question, or ask that question again actually to those on Aldabra, because they'll give you a better response. But for now, I can tell you how I was in 2013. When I went there, so it was for 7 months. So it was May to December. I was meant to go to uni, didn't go to uni, went to Aldabra instead. I had a very different idea of what Aldabra would be. I had thought I'd have to bring 50 or 100 kgs of food for myself and forget about internet, forget about talking to people for the next 6 months. Life, don't get me wrong, life is very hard on Aldabra. It is inhospitable for humans without the investment and dedication of SIF staff. On Mahe, at the Valley de Mai, which supports this financially, and on Aldabra itself. So I was surprised to find a fully stocked shop that is able to have some conveniences that make life away from the rest of the world possible. I was able to find a great community there. Teamwork is everything. It's really important to know that small group of people get along, whether it's for work, whether it's for socializing, whether it's volleyball matches, snorkeling. These things make a huge part of how we all get along. biodiversity wise, what you see, you may as well walk around with a GoPro strapped to your head and still you won't see what's going on enough. It's absolutely wonderful. You see a place with as much chances as this world allows to be natural, I guess. It's almost forgotten by time in that sense, a lot of people say. So for me, whether it's humpback whales, to see that for the first time, to understand that, to see dugongs, to see hammerhead sharks, tiger sharks, bull sharks, I mean, the list goes on, and your sightings, you just rack them up over time. You just get used to seeing 100 green turtles in a snorkeling trip or something ridiculous, and the work you do feels meaningful, and it is meaningful. So there's a lot of job satisfaction. And I think you do feel lucky to be there. It can be hard to be very far away from family. It can be hard to, especially in the Southeast, be disconnected from the world in reality. But I think right now with COVID, it's probably one of the better places to be in the world, especially given how you realize what's in front of you is important. And yeah, there's only 50 places in the world, or 49 other places like Aldabra, so the Great Barrier Reef, Galapagos. So if you get to live there, you're pretty lucky.
Yeah. And like Jeremy said, there will be future episodes with people who are actually on Aldabra, and they can tell you everything you'd like to know about their day-to-day life, and not only their research, but also how they manage to live on Aldabra and how they find it. So another question, is anything being done to combat the climate crisis on Aldabra itself?
Yeah. So we can look at this in several ways. It's always, when we talk climate crisis and how you deal with it, people always talk about mitigation and adaptation. In terms of mitigation, we can say, like with the introduction of Seychelles' first off-the-grid solar power system, SIF has basically been able to really mitigate, I think, by 94% the amount of fuel use for electricity generation on Aldabra. So that's something huge. Within our own activities on Mahe and Valadimir, we also do a lot of sustainable practice. So that's mitigation as an organization. But let's admit it, Seychelles only contributes 0.001% of the greenhouse gases in the world. And whatever we do at Seychelles is not going to necessarily stop the climate crisis in terms of rising CO2 gases. But this is where adaptation, but also, well, this is where mitigation carries on in that sense before adaptation, where Aldabra is a beacon for hope. It's a place, as we're talking about now, that's amazing. With communications for change, with the activities that everybody in SIF does, is really one where we're shouting at the top of our voices in a serious manner with science, saying, look, if we don't do anything soon, it's not just Aldabra within the next couple of decades that'll be lost to the climate crisis, but then it'll be Seychelles and its populated areas. It'll be coastal cities and everything. So it's a canary in a coal mine, and we're really trying to get people to understand that this place goes, other things will go, and what it provides to us, whether it's tourism, whether it's fisheries, whether it's carbon sequestration, being a carbon sink, all these services will be lost if Aldabra is lost. And when Aldabra's gone, other places will follow. So communications for change really talks about, or shares the science that we've come up with the science we're doing, the work we're doing, so that other people understand that and understands what is being threatened. In terms of adaptation, that's the other project that we're taking on, which is a climate vulnerability index assessment for Aldabra and climate justice for Aldabra. So this is something being funded by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. And really, before you can intervene sometimes, is understanding how things are at risk. So this climate vulnerability index will look at we'll look at at least 10 of the outstanding universal values of Aldabra. Let's say it's Aldabra giant tortoises, let's say it's coral reefs or any other part that make part of this, what makes it a UNESCO site. It's going to see what impacts, what threats does climate change face to these things, and begin a process of saying, how do we adapt to these things? But the resources, I mean, it's not as if we can tomorrow create a seawall that's going to prevent Aldabra from being swallowed up by the ocean, So adaptation for Aldabra is a huge thing. I think one thing we're already thinking about, there's already a lot being talked about, is moving the research station somewhere more inland. And that's so we can carry monitoring. But what's really interesting is science research that informs management is key. So we know, let's say if tomorrow we're able to eradicate rats and cats on Aldabra, this would be a hefty price. This would be more than plastic pollution, actually. This would be somewhere between 10, $15 million. If we're able to eradicate rats especially, and we were able to see seabird populations return to the amount they're meant to be on Aldabra. So we would say a restoration of a key ecosystem, I would call it connection. So where somewhere as isolated and far away from nutrition as Aldabra, birds carry, nutrition through eating fish and pooping. That poop will end up in the waters around Aldabra. And what a lot of science is finding out, that poop allows coral reefs to recover, to grow back, to be more resilient to climate change. So there's interventions when we talk about invasive species, and basically if you can get rid of an invasive species, that it can increase the resilience of a whole ecosystem on Aldabra, and that can really have spillover effects for the whole atoll and the region in terms of other islands that might already be connected to Aldabra's coral reefs. So there's many ways, and this is one we're hoping the pipeline we can really take on in the next couple of years. It has to be done.
Yeah. Just to say, in the interest of time, I know we don't have much time left. Keep the questions coming, please. I'm taking note of all of them, and they will be answered in next week's episode, which will be with our CEO. And she'll be able to answer as many questions as you'd like, obviously within the interest of time. But yeah, do keep the questions coming. I will make note if we do run over. Maybe we can have this as the last question. We can wrap up, and the next question we can have CEO answer next week. How can people not in Aldabra help directly? I'm guessing towards the conservation. Great question.
Yeah, thank you, Parrot. I mean, so if you're visiting Seychelles, please visit the Vallée de Mai. The two UNESCO sites are twin, so money that goes to SIF, to Vallée de Mai, entrance fees, that goes to SIF, goes to Aldabra as well. So that's one thing. When we're talking about the climate crisis, it's about really lowering your ecological footprint, but then not stopping there. As individuals, that's not going to change things. Asking your governments, asking corporations to do better, to stop polluting, this is going to be key for the climate crisis. So we're encouraging people, yes, to look at what they can do for their own consumption, own behavior, but don't stop there. That's going to be something holding others accountable is key. We're also actually, I've got to mention, there's a donation button. We will be an online donation button will be added. So if there's financial means that people want to contribute to protecting Aldabra, that's something that's going to be, hopefully by the end of this year, we can put out. I think staying informed, so whether it's following us on our social media, so we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, that's good, because you can see what else we do and how else we can be involved. You can come work for us if you've got a skill set, whether it's in logistics or science. You can do your research here, you can understand what's going on here. You can really, I think, really understand Aldabra by understanding how it's connected to you. So it might be interesting to see in the region, in Africa, what does it mean to have a UNESCO site? What does it mean for tourism? So the more you're able to share, well, to be informed and then share what you know about Aldabra, having a conversation with your family, seeing is there actually a connection to it somehow, this might be interesting. So understanding, and I think that goes back to what Elizabeth was asking, is what is one of the biggest issues in terms of Aldabra? It's remembering it to stay in its conscious. Because where we are right now, I don't think we'll forget it. But in the next coming years, with everything that we'll have to contend with, is Aldabra still going to be a priority for some people? And that's a question that is only answered by people understanding their connection to Aldabra. So I would say already being part of this live helps. And yeah, stay tuned for more. And again, if you want any more answers, there's info@sif.sc. We'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah, but save the questions for the next live. Don't ask us questions. Or you can even, if you like, you can send some questions through info@sif.sc or to our Instagram DM or Facebook messages. Send over some questions, we'll make note of them, and we can cover them in the next coming lives. Obviously, please attend. It really helps, and I think for a company, a foundation that is really trying to not only conserve these World Heritage sites, but also help educate. It's really important to us to have this kind of interaction. And yeah, thank you all for coming and engaging today. It's been really great. And yeah, I think like Jeremy said, do follow us, do share our posts with your friends, like share the story, retweet, anything, but spread the message, and that definitely helps. So I'll leave it to Jeremy to wrap up.
Yeah, if I can ask one question, Mara, do you know how many questions we got now? Would you have an idea?
Yeah, I have a tally. Do you want me to say?
Yeah. Drum roll. Da 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 da. Da.
Okay, so I'm really bad at counting like on the spot, but I around 27, around 26, 27, and that's the ones that we
27.
answered. So we do have more that we didn't get to answer, but I have taken screenshots of them. We can answer them next time. So we
Awesome.
will
Well,
ask even more than 27. So more than
well,
30.
wow. Okay. Okay. This is great. So thank you so much for those who've asked those questions. I hope I've given at least some half answers, if not full answers. And I think for me, thank you to those who've also contributed their knowledge in the comments. And I guess for me to close it, Mara, thank you so much for being part of this. I know there's others who've been part of this from behind the scenes as well. So big thanks to them. Alvania, no other like the CEO who you'll get next week. This is something I think will be really great if other people interact. So do send your questions in. And the last thanks goes to MCB Seychelles, Cable Wireless Seychelles, H-Savvy Insurance, Sacos Insurance, and Space 95 Seychelles. Thank you guys so much actually for supporting SIF and the Eco School trip. We really look forward to answering your questions in the next live, 6 p.m. Wednesday. And I think if you guys are really wanting more of these, we can also do stuff for Valid May. There's no reason for this not to be at both sites. So again, thank you so much for interaction and for raising funds with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, see you next Wednesday, same time, same day. Put in your calendar.
Bye.
See you.